All right, well, hello again. My name is Brian Geary. I'm the Communications Director for Pearson College, UWC. And today I'm going to be talking with the Executive Director of the UWC National Committee of Canada, Louisa Vasquez. And we've spoken with Louisa before, and she's been very helpful in sort of shining a light on the National Committee, particularly here in Canada, and the many volunteers who are supporting the National Committee in this country. So without further ado, let's go right into our interview. And I guess we're here to talk about the young Canadians who are going to be going to Pearson and one of the 17 other UWC schools, most
Yeah,
of them this fall, beginning in August and September. So it's good to see you again, Louisa. And
thank you,
maybe
Brian.
just to begin, just remind us of what the responsibilities of the executive coordinator are, or executive director rather.
No problem. I just want to start with a land acknowledgement, just to acknowledge that I live and I work in the unceded territory of the Souk First Nation, but the headquarters of the National Committee, so as Pearson College, they're located in the Siano Beecher Bay First Nation.
Thank you.
And
Very
I
good
want to
reminder.
thank, I am an immigrant to this country, and so I try and remember this as much as I can. And yes, I am the executive director for the National Committee. And my responsibility is to manage our volunteer-run organization. We select and nominate students, Canadian students, or people living in Canada to UWCs around the world. There's 18 schools, as most of you know that are watching this. And yeah, I've been here for only a year. I'm living and learning every day, and very happy for all the support I get from the volunteers and the staff at Pearson College.
Well, the impression I have of volunteers for the National Committee here in Canada and other national committees around the world is that they're very, very dedicated people, um, working some fairly long hours with some fairly demanding responsibilities. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the volunteers that you work with.
Yes, the majority of them are alum. There's also parents of alum that are involved in some of the volunteer activities. And the reason for this is because alum always want to give back to the movement in some way or another. And in the selections process, which has 14 chapters for provinces and territories, plus a chapter for Canadians living abroad, we have over 70 volunteers alone in that process, and their volunteer hours are more than 1,800 hours together. So it's a lot of time that our volunteers spend reading applications, making decisions about those applications, interviewing those applicants, and then making decisions about those interviews. And they also, some provinces like the one in Quebec, they have support for students while they're at UWCs. They touch base with them. So there's a lot of things that our volunteers are doing all the time to promote and get UWCers, more Canadian UWCers, I should say.
Well, as you say, I mean, the number of hours that volunteers are working is pretty staggering. So there must be
Mhm.
a talk about a way to live the mission, I guess, as it were.
Mhm.
If you're an alumni or even a parent of an alum as
Yeah,
well.
and we have many other ways for people to volunteer. So, and the nominations committee is a less number of volunteers, but there's only 7 volunteers, but there's also a lot of hours involved, 1,400 hours. That's a lot of time that they spend for 7 volunteers only. And then we have all our board is also volunteer based, and all the different things, chapters and committees of the board that put a lot of time into that. So I gave the example of the most amount of people and most hours, but there's a lot of things going on as a volunteer run organization.
It sounds like a pretty big plate full of work for you too. I mean, kind of organizing all those volunteers and keeping everybody on stream, I suppose. Volunteers are great, but they do need a certain bit of direction. And how's that experience been for you this year?
It's been great. People are always wanting to give back, as I said, and most of our volunteers are either studying or working full-time. And so I'm always at awe for the amount of time they spent on top of that, and sometimes having young families and things like that. Like life is pretty full, especially during COVID too. We have more challenges, and I have been just amazed at the amount of time and the perseverance that they have with this process. It's amazing.
That's a really good point to bring up. We're recording this interview in late June, and we're going to be distributing it out probably in late July.
Mhm.
And presumably there are still going to be a lot of COVID restrictions in place at that time. But tell us about how the pandemic affected the National Committee's operations. For example, I know that there are a number of opportunities for volunteers to actually meet students in person, and that's the desired way to go. But I guess that didn't really happen this year, perhaps
No.
for the second year in a row.
Yeah, so this is the first full cycle. So last year when we spoke in July, the interviews had happened already in person, because by March the interviews were already finished. But this year all of the things happened online. It wasn't the first time for the National Committee to have an online process, because we have the Chapter 14 and they do the whole process online for Canadians living abroad.
Mhm.
But it was definitely a change for a lot of chapters that had never done that before. And we came together as a group and brainstormed and kind of gave resources to each other. The international office was also really helpful in giving some examples of activities and things you could do online. And everybody really came together and embraced the new reality and moved forward, because they knew that we were still sending students to UWC, so we still had a job to do.
So without putting words in your mouth, it was a piece of cake this year, I guess. Eh?
It was challenging, but everybody came up to the challenge, and we all worked together to make it happen.
That's certainly what it sounds like now. Now let's talk a little bit about the fresh cohort of Canadians who will be going to UWC schools around the world.
Mhm.
I know there's a usual range of students, the young Canadians that we have. How many do we have this fall? How many will be coming to, selfishly, Pearson,
Mhm.
and how many will be going to other schools?
For sure. So we did the whole process this year, as I explained, and we got students going to 11 schools in total, but that's first years. So we have all the second years, hopefully all of them returning after the summer. If you're watching the second years, I hope you're going back to school. And yeah, so that means that we have 30 going to Pearson College, and there's 20 going to other schools. However, our process is not finished yet. We're still, there's still one part of the process that hasn't closed, and so we may have more students going to UWCs. So this is the numbers we have as of right now.
Well, the more the better. Let's put it that way. So is there anything unique about this virtual online cohort of students? Anything that you would observe that might be different from previous years?
Well, it's the first time in a couple of years that we've had 2 students from Saskatchewan going to UWCs, which is great. I think that we're always aiming for a more regional representation of Canada. We also have more Indigenous students going to UWCs than last year, and we hope to continue growing all those numbers. And we got a lot of students that are first generation Canadian. A lot of our chapters commented this year that it was the most diverse cohort that they've seen since they started volunteer with us. So I think it's a really great. We keep investing in our promotions and our strategies to get the word out there, to have socioeconomic diversity. And so some of these efforts are paying back, and we hope to have just more and more growth with our number of people that we have to represent a diverse country.
It's very interesting to hear you describe it as one of the most, or hear the volunteers describe it as one of the most diverse. cohorts.
Mhm,
We sort of think how that is always happening, but I guess there are noticeable changes year over year.
mhm.
So very interesting. Um, I know that, again, to go back to COVID protocols, you don't necessarily get to know the students. You don't get sort of as as clear a feeling about the students, but are there any sort of interesting backstories that students bring or experiences? We've talked about this and written about this in the past, because there really is such a diverse variety of experiences that Canadians bring to the UWC world.
Yes, of course. I mean, we have a class that has a lot of different backgrounds and things that they like and they highlighted in their application and in their interviews. Um, there are some great students that are going to Pearson College this year and other schools as well. For the first time, we're having to send 2 students to UWC East Africa, which is the most recent open school. So that is great. One of them self-identifies as Indigenous, and so it's great to have diversity in other UWCs as well.
Mhm.
And we've had some incredible stories of resilience for families and students during the pandemic, and ways that they help their communities and help their peers. And it's just great to hear some of this. And I'm sure that you'll be meeting some of those students on campus and having opportunities to showcase them on your social media and things like that. We're also, for the first year, we're gonna start showcasing our students incoming class on social media. Our volunteer, who is Alipo Chan, alum, Sam Monk, she manages our social media stuff. She's been doing a great job at getting some stories from students. So you'll see some of those in our social media, and I'm happy to share more with you.
Oh, we'll look forward to that, and we'll look forward to cross-posting those as well. That'll
Yes.
be great.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful to actually have a sense of the students who are coming in, especially in the past year when we on campus had relatively little direct contact with the students due to the COVID protocols. I mean, here's hoping that everything is different this coming fall and winter. Um, yeah, I want to go back to you mentioned that we're having a greater number of Indigenous students,
Mhm,
and often we find that some students, once they come to campus, they will also self-identify as Indigenous. So
mhm.
the numbers are always somewhat fluid, I guess. But
Yeah.
I know that you and some of the volunteers, I guess, went through some of the NCC application material, the processes, and the documents attached to it to see if you could identify any impediments to that might deter some Indigenous students and/or families from applying. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. Um, I just want to share that a lot of the people that are reviewing applications and doing things are alum of UWC, and they have great critical thinking skills, and they're able to sometimes to discern that certain people don't have the same opportunities. So their application form may not be the same as another person that's had more opportunities. And they've been great so far at kind of identifying this through the application process, but we wanted to make it more apparent to people that are looking at our application and looking at our process that we are open to people with any type of opportunities they've had, and equity is important for us, and we want to have diversity in our students. So we changed the application form through the Reconciliation Action Working Group that
Mhm.
Pearson College has. And we've been working in collaboration with Pearson College to look at our processes, to modify some of our the things we do to make it better and easier and more accessible for people. And we've gone through our application form and made some changes so that people are aware that when they're reading things that they can explain ways in which they have had experiences or things that are diverse, that they don't need to be an expensive activity or something that's only accessible in the big city, but rather that any type of experience they've had, no matter where they come from, is valuable in the application.
That's really an important point for all of us to remember, that young people in particular don't necessarily have the accessibility to
Mhm,
all of the amenities and the opportunities that would exist in one place versus another. So
mhm.
sounds like a really timely kind of modification to make. So thank you to you and the volunteers for doing that.
Yeah.
Um, I know how busy you are, and thank you so much again for your time with this. This is more or less my last question, but
Okay.
the application season is coming up fairly soon. It's coming up in mid-August, August 15th, and it runs from the middle of August to the middle of November. But we really, really like it when people get in there early and they start filling out their applications.
Yeah.
What do you want to say about that process?
Yeah.
Promotion-wise, where should people go online? That type of thing.
So my first thing is just a call to action. If you have gone to a UWC, if you have worked for a UWC, if you volunteer for a UWC, any way that you know about UWC, is talk to people about it. If you know that you haven't talked to someone about UWC, the most important thing is word of mouth, and not keeping UWC the best kept secret in Canada. We really don't like that. We want to have lots of people know about us. And so it's mostly word of mouth and talk to people about us. We do have a website. It's ca.uwc.org. And you can see the application form in there. Everything will be accessible starting on the 15th of August. So that's when applications open. And we have social media, Instagram, UWC_Canada. And then we have UWC National Committee of Canada on Facebook as well. And we have a LinkedIn page too. There's lots of ways you can engage with us. Liking our post, sharing our posts, liking Pearson College's post, sharing their posts, all brings awareness to UWC in this country. And anything you can do to help us will be greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the work that you do. And thank you very much for working with volunteers for the National Committee of Canada. I will talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks. Bye-bye.